Howdy, howdy, and thanks for checking out episode 108 of the Eyes Free Sports podcast. My name is Greg Lindberg. Here on this episode of Eyes Free Sports, our guest is a gentleman from the great state of California, by way of Switzerland, actually, and he happens to be a totally blind marathon runner, surfer, tandem cyclist, and overall very interesting and insightful guy. So let's get running now with episode 108 of the Eyes Free Sports podcast. Okay, so my guest here on this episode of the podcast is Roger Oberholzer, and Roger is a visually impaired runner, surfer, blind stoker, and all-around talented adaptive athlete. Roger, welcome to Eyes Free Sports.
Thank you for having me. Thank you, Greg.
Absolutely. Definitely appreciate you taking the time to do this. I do have to give a shout out to Neil McDonald, Neil Dog, as some know him as, for recommending you. I've had Neil on the podcast several times, and he spoke very highly of you, so it's an honor to interview you here today.
Thank you.
Sure. So why don't we just kick things off with kind of your background as far as where you were born and your early years in life?
So I grew up in a town near Zurich in Switzerland. I was lucky enough to grow up in, a beautiful, safe, stable place. I, went through the regular schooling system in Switzerland, meaning kindergarten and so forth. And then at age 6, I had something that's called Stevens-Johnson syndrome, which is an allergic reaction towards medications that I had, and it affected my body and my eyes, which led to eventually me having a lot of problems in regards to sight, and I was actually for 6 weeks in a coma. And they weren't sure. I'm 51 years old now, so we're talking in the late 70s, meaning there was no internet, there was no interaction, that critical time interaction between different countries. And so it took them quite a while to figure out what I actually had, because Stevens-Johnson is fairly rare even to this date, except nowadays, they can figure it out a lot faster than back then. And I was in Switzerland, I wasn't in the US. So they found out what I had eventually, but it affected my eyes to the point where I still saw, but I would eventually have limited sight. So it meant that I would have enlargements and so forth in public school. I went to regular school. I didn't go to a school for the blind or visually impaired. And I had sight, but I couldn't tell you how much, correction I needed. I was able to play soccer. I was able to cycle. I was able to do pretty much everything. I just took papers a lot closer to me than, my peers that would see. And what ended up happening is, which is kind of nice in Switzerland, they were like, okay, Roger doesn't see that well, let's have him get enlarged text and so forth. And that was really the truth for all my growing up in Switzerland, even through business school. When I needed accommodations, it wasn't this battle where I had to get doctor's notes saying, Roger is visually impaired. I mean, it seemed obvious, and the accommodations I needed were granted pretty easily. Not as much paperwork as I encountered here when I went to university here with accommodations and so forth. So and then as I got older, I participated, even when I was, I learned how to ski at a young age, even before I had Stevens-Johnson. And then as I got older, I started playing on soccer teams, and started also playing roll hockey, and and then at about when it came to making my career decision path, I started working for a Swiss bank and did an internship there and graduated with a business degree. And then it was interesting because it was I had to choose where do I want to work, and I had a chance to work one of the famous big Swiss banks, and I had also a chance to work for some international banks, but I opted to work for the Swiss bank, and that was probably the best job I ever had. And I still had sight back then. I had some cornea transplants, but I'll go into that in a little bit. So that was my educational thing, basically, to this point.
Sure. Interesting. And then, so what was your actual job with that bank?
So I was working in ATM software development, but on the project management side. So I had a chance to work with people that were in programming, developing ATM software and so forth. And it was very interesting to observe, the different personalities and so forth. It was a ton of fun.
Nice. Yeah, sounds like great memories and great people you got to work with.
Yeah.
At what point did you actually come to the US?
So I ended up, during my education, I did pretty well in school. And my dad said, Roger, I'm taking you to the US for a trip as a reward. And so we traveled. I had a cornea transplant in Switzerland, and my doctors were not sure how it would turn out. If my corneas would perforate or not. And so I ended up being while we were traveling, we traveled to LA, we traveled to San Diego, we traveled to Las Vegas, we traveled to several different areas, and I had a list of doctors that the doctors in Switzerland gave me and said, hey, if you have a problem, these are the doctors you're going to see, in case, if something happens, go and see these doctors if you have an emergency. And so what ended up happening, I was in San Diego at the time when I could tell my cornea perforated, and it's kind of almost I compare it to a water balloon that perforates, and your eye starts tearing really quite a bit. And so what ended up happening, I had to have an emergency transplant in San Diego. My cornea turned out pretty well, and then I went back to Switzerland, worked there, and did some additional education and so forth. And then what ended up happening is my corneas would always fail, though. And so at one point, they decided that, hey, we need to figure something else out because of the Stevens-Johnson syndrome that I had as a child. What happens is my body reacts very violently towards foreign tissue. So what ended up happening is the corneas would get rejected after a few months, and that's because the epithelium on top of the corneas would not stay and protect the eye. And so what ended up happening is they connected me with an HLA typed cornea, which means they were looking at for 4 factors, like 2 is a good match, 3 is an excellent match, and 4 at the time they told me that is almost like the donor would be almost like your twin, or there are only 2 or 3 people living at the same time on Earth that have that. I don't know if anything changed since I got that information, but at the time that's what they told us. I got one that had a 3 factor. It was a cornea that came that I had to, that came originally from Holland, came to Switzerland. I got then with the cornea tissue and all the paperwork you can imagine to on the plane with my dad, flew to the US, and the surgeon here implanted that cornea into me. And also my dad, who was closest genetic from the testing that they did to me, donated some of the conjunctival graft. And with that cornea, I saw 2025. And, I was lucky enough to see that. Well, went back to Switzerland. And then the question came up. I was done with my education, graduated, and so forth. And then they were like, okay, where, I was like, I'm going to go to San Diego for 6 months and study English and go into homestay family and of all things. And it's kind of funny that, Neil and you I think, are both big baseball people. And well, from all the sports that I don't like, baseball, I think I mentioned that to you before. Baseball is the one that I don't like. And I laid on the host family's living room floor, and their 2-year-old son wanted to come and wrestle, and he kicked me right in that cornea. So that's how I lost that cornea. And then after that, they decided to always to do cornea transplants that, because we needed one so quickly, that wasn't HLA typed. And that was like a problem because, as I mentioned before, in hindsight, it's really crucial that with that condition that it's just carefully looked at by the doctors to make these decisions. And in the US, they don't really do HLA typed corneas that often. But in hindsight, I probably would have waited again for an HLA typed cornea, but that's not what happened.
Sure. Wow. So definitely a freak accident that took care of your vision.
Yeah.
How old were you when that happened then?
So that happened when I was probably, I would say, roughly around 22 or so.
Right.
And so then around 2022. And then what happened is like I would fly back and forth while I was working between Switzerland and the US, and would have these surgical procedures. And then at one point, my situation was so critical that the doctors were like, because I literally had like dozens of cornea transplants, they were like, okay, Roger, you gotta, consider staying here in the US. And so I ended up meeting my first wife, and then, I decided, okay, I'm going to stay in the US. And that's how I ended up in the US, is basically because of the medical condition I had, and the care that I was given in the 90s was a lot more specialized than what I encountered lately. But yeah, I felt like I would be better served staying in the US and having my surgeries here, and go also get some additional degrees while I was undergoing the surgeries, because you have so much time off during transplants that I ended up getting more degrees in the US.
I see. Interesting. So then in terms of adaptive sports, so I know you did mention you did play some sports growing up, as a kid when you had more vision. So how did you kind of get introduced to sports for the blind and adaptive sports in general?
My dad was actually the president of a soccer team in Switzerland when I was growing up. So, and soccer is very popular in Switzerland. And so I was basically always, since I can remember, a soccer fan. And then I started playing soccer really young, and skiing, and just, with my friends and so forth, the normal kid sports, but then also joined, the youth team and so forth. And then when I got older, I just always loved sports. It was always for me something that I liked participating in with even peers that were fully sighted, and I was never like on a team for visually impaired athletes, so to speak, even though I was visually impaired. Even at the time, right? My vision wasn't 20/20. And so how I first got introduced to visual impairment sports was when I lived for a time in San Diego in 2016, and I got introduced to the Blind Stokers Club in San Diego, and
Yep.
and I started riding quite frequently with my captains, which is it's a fantastic club for anybody that wants to tandem cycle, and they have a huge pool of captains and stokers, and every year they have an event called Cycling for Sight. That is a big event. It's a 2-day event. And I got introduced to that. I found out, I don't even recall how I exactly found out about it, but I got in touch with David White, who's the director, one of the directors of the club. And the event was just happening. So I took part in that event, and have gone numerous times since then to the Cycling for Sight event, and met some great people through that, captains and stokers and so forth. And now they even have like a hiking, like a blind stokers adventure segment where they go hiking and do events in the desert and so forth. So it's a great program. And then when I moved to Folsom, I was like, okay, I don't have any tandem captains here. How do I find tandem captains? And that's how I met Richard Hunter, who's the founder of United in Stride. And I called Richard Hunter and was like, hey, Richard, I heard you have tandem captains. And he said to me, actually, Roger, I don't know that many tandem captains, but I can hook you up with running guides. And so that's how me and my second wife started running together in 2018, and we did the California International Marathon Relay, and that's how I started running, because of Richard's influence in hooking me up with guides to run with. And it has been my passion and, so to speak, happy place ever since to run with the guides I have.
Sure. That's awesome. And I'm curious, had you done any kind of running prior to that, or?
I did in school. I ran but only on the local level. I wasn't I never thought before that I would run marathons. That was never my thing. I would have never dreamt of running marathons. And when I started running in 2018, it was an event called the Big Run, and it was a 5K run, and I thought that I'm gonna die. I thought this is like the it's the longest run ever, and now a training run is longer than that, but it takes so much. It takes so much time and training, and I think that's the neat thing about running a marathon running, especially all the athletes. You don't have people being arrogant about it, because everybody realizes how much training it takes, how much preparation it takes, how much effort it takes, and people really respect each other because of all the efforts that go into it. So it has been a really, really great thing that, like, I met some fabulous people through guiding, and also athletes that participated beside me on the California International Marathon, or even the shorter runs, like the half marathons, or even in the World Majors marathons. You meet these other athletes with disabilities, and it's always an awesome experience to meet all these other athletes that are fulfilling their goals by finishing a world major marathon.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I definitely wanted to ask you a little more about some of those major events, like the New York City Marathon, the Boston Marathon, Chicago. Just in general, any memories of any of those really come to mind and stand out to you?
I mean, the nice thing about these different events is, the Boston Marathon is special because it's the oldest marathon, and it's a huge thing
Sure.
to qualify for the Boston Marathon and then being able to participate in it because it's so iconic, right? Like the New York so I was able to qualify for the Boston Marathon, and I was able to run in that marathon in 2022. Two guides of mine were going to that event with me, Tiffany and Paolo, and we were able to finish under 5 hours. And it was a great event because I was able to bring two of my guides to that event. And when I started with them, I told them if I ever get the chance to go to Boston, I would ask them first, and they were both able to make it and are still guides to this day for me. Then my second event was also in 2022. That was the New York Marathon. And that one was brutal because I ended up in Boston. I actually didn't know about Achilles International. I came to be introduced to Achilles International later in preparation for the New York Marathon. And the way I learned about Achilles International was I was planning on going with one of my guides from here, and she had some personal matters that she had to take care of, and I had to find the replacement guide for New York. And what ended up happening is Achilles International hooked me up with Michaela and with Simon, who's actually from England. And so I had two guides that never ran with me before, but are fantastic people and friends now. And I mean, Simon flew all the way from England to guide me for the New York Marathon. And what was interesting about the New York Marathon, I had a hotel room change because my hotel room flooded that I was in. And then I ended up in a different hotel room next to some ladies that had a party night, and I was like, I got like 2 hours of sleep because they were so loud next door that I thought I'm gonna crash. But my guides were fantastic, and Michaela especially, she's like, you're doing fine, and I'm like thinking, there is no way I'm gonna do this. And there are so many resources, financial and others, where you go like, I can't quit. There is no way I can quit. And also in that moment, I remember it very vividly. It was around mile 17. It was super warm in New York that year. It was like in the high 50s or even low 60s. And I was like, oh my gosh. And it started drizzling. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, I don't know if I can do this for 9 more miles. And then there comes this moment where you realize, hey, there are all these people, that invest the time to help us participate in these events, right? All my running guides, all like Michaela taking time and Simon flying from England and, helping me guide and accomplish this. And you go like, there is no way I can quit, or it, all their time and resources that they invested go down too. And I was like, no, I'm gonna fight through this, and I finished it. But I had like 5.5 hours. It was the hardest marathon I ever ran because I had so little sleep. And yeah, that was definitely a huge experience. But the people in New York, the spectators, and the experience I had with Achilles in New York was just fantastic too, getting me the two guides. And, setting me up with it, which was an unknown for me, right? I didn't know how many people they guided. I knew Simon guided a lot of people, but guiding was fairly new for Michaela. She's very athletic and a very driven lady, but she did fantastic. It was a great experience, and just the differences between those marathons. It's like it's such a huge event with all these runners, but each has its own uniqueness, and yeah, so that's the difference. And then the last one I did was the 2023 Chicago Marathon a few months ago, where I went with one of my local guides here, Ron, to Chicago, and then Achilles hooked me up with the guide from Chicago, Chris, who ran too. It was the first time for Chris to run with the hand tether, because I actually always run with the hand tether, and that's because I'm completely blind. I have no light perception or anything. And so all my guides are guiding me with the hand tether.
Interesting. Yeah. Versus the waist.
Yeah. And I've never ran with the waist tether. I don't think I guess I should try it out sometime. I can see where swinging your arms would be easier, but I don't think I would get enough feedback, especially during a race, a big race,
Sure.
where you need that feedback of left or right. And, you know, so I don't know. I've heard of people that love running with the waist tether, but I think from what I know, that's more used like in triathlon situations, but I could be totally wrong. So,
Gotcha.
yeah.
Interesting. And I'm definitely curious a little more about the guides that you've had, and what would you say are like the keys to having a successful partnership with that guide, just in terms of communication and how you guys work together.
It's really important that that the guides that you let the guides know what you have to respect the guides' time and resources too. Some guides have they have races on their own, and they need to do what they do too. They have families, they have jobs, and we need to be flexible in making these considerations for our guides too. But it is truly a teamwork, and one can never forget that this is a total, I don't have the resources to pay my guides. Like, I can't pay them, 20, $30 an hour to go running with me.
Sure.
So all my guides are volunteers, and, have become friends. And the difference they have made in my life is humongous. I mean, they will never even realize what they truly have done to helping me participate in adaptive sports and in these marathon races, because without them I couldn't do that, without any of the sighted guides or whatever sports we decide to do. If we don't have some sighted volunteers, it's in very few sports we would be able to participate in. And so it's huge when people sacrifice their time and resources, because that's one thing you can never gain that back, right? Like money, you make some money, you waste some money, but time is, we all have only a finite amount of time here. And if guides are willing to give some of that time to us to help us participate in sports, that's, like, to me, that's a huge sacrifice they make.
Absolutely. Such a great point, and such special individuals that really take the time and spend their own money a lot of times to help, people with disabilities in general be able to participate in these types of events. Just a little more on like the communication with your guide. I did want to mention this video you had sent me. One of the local news stations there in California did a piece on yourself and I believe another blind runner. And I thought it was interesting in the video. One of the guides was saying like 3, 2, 1, and then saying, turn left, turn
bridge
right.
or rails.
Yeah. If you could just elaborate a little more on that.
that is sometimes differs, like my guides and I talk quite a bit with my guides. I'm sure sometimes they're like, Roger, be quiet, like, but we talk about just daily life and stuff, or they describe areas to me or stuff like that. But yeah, they call out, rails and so forth, and they do the count, or they say, hey, we're gonna pass a pole and stay tight, or things like that. I had guides that would, when you first meet the guide, that has never guided before. Some of them are like, oh, twig, or a stick, or things like that, and that stuff that doesn't necessarily need to be called out, right?
Sure.
Like, at least for me, not. But that's like one of the things you want to tell the guides, because some of them, they have never guided, or they have guided someone. There are so many different levels of blindness where, someone, I have no sight, but someone that may have some usable sight, they want to be guided differently than me. Or that what's important to them is differently than what is necessarily how I'm asking my guides to guide me. Um, even between two totally blind people, I don't think anybody is guided the same way. It's a very individual thing. The way I'm asking, or my guides guide me, and it's interesting. Every guide that I have guides me slightly differently than the other guide. In just minusculely, like there isn't a lot of difference, but there is none is exactly the same, right? Like the way they hold the tether, or the way they give me feedback with the tether, nothing is exactly the same. And it's just that the guides also know to that you have realistic expectations from your guides, and that you're always open with your guides, and have that communication flow regarding availability, how long the runs are, all that stuff, and that it's well coordinated, because ultimately we are the ones that need the assistance and need to convey that to the guide and say, hey, can we do this? What's your availability? And so forth.
Exactly. Yeah. And definitely interesting insight. I appreciate you describing that, and such a great point about how everyone's different. Like it comes down to personality and just communication style. And but at the end of the day, it sounds like you've had some just truly amazing people that have guided you and have been super, super helpful and successful in that. As far as surfing, I understand you have done some surfing, right?
Yeah, I did surfing too. I got into that while I was actually the first time I surfed was with my second wife. We went to Hawaii, and we went through a travel agency that was locally there, and we both are blind, and so what ended up happening is we tried to go surfing, and at first we were not sure how they would react, and we ended up going with the surfing place. We didn't even know that, and the guy was like that owned it was one of the top surfers, I guess, even in the world. And he sent out two of his best instructors, and that was fantastic because they took us to this bay, and I think we were even alone in there, but it was like fantastic. We were out there, like it's definitely something that I'll never forget. But then when I lived in San Diego, the Lions Club in Encinitas, they have this once a year surfing event together with I think it's called Urban Kids or something, with the surf school there in Encinitas. And you go for a day, and they teach you how to surf on the beach and in near Carlsbad. And that has been fantastic. I've gone a few times to that, and it's always fun. and I formed their relationships with some of the instructors and that have become friends and are willing to teach me even when the surf event is not going on. So it's like, yeah, it's definitely it's interesting because I often try in surfing to do more of a skiing stance, and I need to be reminded, like, no, that's not how you do it, you know. Um, so yeah, but by no means am I like a great surfer. I can do it somewhat, but I definitely have room to grow.
Sure. Gotcha. And as far as like the adaptations of surfing, I mean, it sounds like it's pretty minimal, as a blind surfer.
It's more they line you up with the waves, the side guides, and then you have to hop up there and surf towards the shore, right? Like so.
Right.
I don't know about minimal. The thing is like it just depends on what level and so forth. And I'm not at an advanced level where it's just a day of fun for me in the water. Like I love doing stuff like that. And the same is true with water skiing. I do up here. We have during the summer we have a play. It's operated by a Chief Tao, which is another nonprofit that has water skiing in this area. And you can book some slots and then go water skiing in a lake that is being, filled during the summer, and you can go water skiing, and that I love doing that. That is, that has come quite easy to me because of it's pretty easy to water ski. I don't know if it's even because of the background I had already in skiing, but it's definitely something super fun to do and that we have the opportunity to do that up here in Northern California is great.
Nice.
I've never seen that actually in Southern California. Have you seen it in your area, adaptive water skiing for the blind?
Yeah, I actually did get to try it a couple years ago in Florida, and it was kind of for people with all disabilities. But yeah, it was quite the experience. It was pretty invigorating and pretty empowering feeling I got from that.
And that's the same here with the Chief Tao. They do it for, not just blind people, but for people with various disabilities.
Exactly, yeah, which is really neat to see. As far as any other sports for the blind, any others that you've tried or would be interested in trying?
I definitely would like to get into the hiking stuff. I did that when I was already visually impaired, but I would definitely like to do that. One of the things on my bucket list is that I do at one point go and try to climb the Matterhorn. Since I'm from Switzerland and I have a running guide in Switzerland who told me that she has a friend that would definitely be able to do that as a guide. And her and her husband are avid hikers, and they have almost made it to the top, but they had to turn around because the weather changed. And then she said you can't mess around there because it can get really dangerous super quickly. And it's for anybody. It's a huge endeavor to do that event, but to climb the Matterhorn. But especially, I think time wise, it takes so much extra time to go with the blind person and do these things than when you're on your own inside it. So that will be definitely something I'll have to prepare for and learn about. So yeah, that's on my bucket list.
Nice, very cool. And I know you do want to run, as far as the London Marathon, I think you said you do have that actually coming up, right?
Yes, that is going to be on April 21st, and that will be my fourth world majors. And so I'm excited about that one. I have some friends from Switzerland that will come and cheer me on. And I also have one of my guides who she will come and guide me there. And her husband and one of her sons will come to and, be cheering us on. So that will be my first event in Europe. I've never ran a race in Europe this far. I've trained, in Switzerland and so forth when I went back for visits, and was training for the Boston Marathon, but I've never raced in Europe or in Switzerland for that matter. So that will be exciting to see, to compare the different venues. And that's something I think I always want to do, even if I have the privilege to ever complete the 6-star medal, or by then it might be a 7-star World Majors Marathon medal, who knows? I think I would always want to combine vacations with a half marathon or a marathon race rather than going and seeing, going to museums or, architecture or something like that. I think doing something related with sports or hiking or cycling would always be my preferred choice of experience a country.
Sure, understandable. And hey, best of luck on London. We'll definitely be excited to hear how that goes for you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and then so final question here. As far as advice for other blind and visually impaired individuals listening to this, maybe that aren't quite as active or are trying to find their niche when it comes to sports or recreation, what kind of advice would you tell someone like that as far as, the benefits of being active and being involved in sports?
I mean, the one thing that happens is, for example, it just gets us out to participate with other people. You get to socialize with other people. Actually, in Chicago, I had the privilege sitting during a dinner next to an athlete that had a different disability than I, and it was cool that I had that chance to interact with an athlete that was a hand cyclist that I have absolutely had no clue about, and he shared some of his experiences with me, and we exchanged information, how we participate and stuff like that, and that was cool for me. It's always a great new experience to meet other athletes, to meet sighted people also, like, that become your friends. As far as a device that I use an iPhone 14 Pro, because it's the most accessible phone for me. And I'm wearing an Apple Watch Ultra that I use. So together with the Nike Run Club app, it tracks for me my runs, and I can also, have the call outs when I pass certain mileages and so forth. So, people can get devices that give them the option to, hey, I can run or whatever other sports, and just reach out to these organizations or people in your community. May that be some of the consumer organizations like the American Council of the Blind or the National Federation of the Blind that I'm part of, and and look for resources. And even if they're not aligned with any of the disability organizations such as NFB or ACB, reach out to like Achilles International, or create a profile on United in Stride and say, hey, I want to be a walker, I want to be a runner. And those are great resources that are around it. And or the Blind Stokers Club in San Diego, and become active. Nobody has to be, like in my situation, I did a 5K run. I thought I'm going to die. And the bug bit me in the rear, and I, decided, hey, I want to do this more seriously. So, yeah.
Nice. Great advice and great way to wrap up here.
Thank you. And thank you for having me. And I hope I could share some information for people with disabilities that want to be active too, and maybe had not some of this information that I was able to share with you, and hopefully they can tap into these resources that definitely have helped me to have a more positive outlook on life.
Definitely, yeah. And I was going to mention I will include a link to that video, the news piece that was done on you, and then also links to all these organizations as well in the show notes, so people can easily access that info too.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Alrighty. Yep. Again, Roger Oberholzer here on Eyes Free Sports. Really, really appreciate the time, Roger. It's been a true pleasure. Congrats on all your achievements, and certainly look forward to following your athletic journey.
Thank you.
To hear more episodes of the Eyes Free Sports podcast and to subscribe, search for Eyes Free Sports on your favorite podcast platform or visit eyesfreesports.com. Be sure to follow the Eyes Free Sports podcast at facebook.com/eyesfreesports and on Twitter at Eyes Free Sports.